Hi, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you a book review and I'm very excited about this. So if you enjoy this type of content and other homeschool and lifestyle content, please remember to subscribe and let's get into it. All right, so it's been a minute since I've done a book review. I used to do them every single month, and then when I'm like during pregnancy and having a baby, I just don't read as much. It's harder for me to read or I fall asleep. And so I just don't end up reading very much, especially a little bit more like intellectual type books and stuff. Not that I really have much of that to share with you this time around, but hopefully soon there'll be a little bit more intellectual books. But so I just haven't been reading a whole lot. And in January I was like, okay, the baby's sleeping well. We're going to get back into reading again, at least reading a little bit more consistently. So that's what I tried to do. And so I'll probably do these every 2 months, I think. Every month was a little bit much. I'll probably still be reading similar amounts. Hopefully, you know, as I continue to go on, I'll be able to get some more reading in. But every month was just a lot. So you can look forward to them every couple of months. And so that's what we're gonna do today, is just talk about a few books I've been reading basically since the beginning of January. And there's some really good ones. Most of it is just kind of more fun reading and book club reading, but I still enjoyed a lot of what I read. All right, the first book I read was Tress of the Emerald Sea, and I don't actually have it to show here because we got it from the library. My 10-year-old, 10 and a half, she's almost 11, I guess, daughter read it first. My husband's read it. It's a Brandon Sanderson book. And I had never read any of Brandon Sanderson's books, but he's like, oh, you should try this. And it was a book club book for, I think it was for January, maybe February. And so I was like, oh, I'll read it and stuff. And so I did, and I really enjoyed it. His books are a little bit more, they're fantasy more, at least I've only read one. My husband really loves them. And I've only read one, so I don't know. But they're very clean, so that's very good. But it's a little bit more fantasy, which fantasy has always been hard for me. I never really loved it that much, and I don't know why. I guess maybe I just don't have a good enough imagination to create a world that's different than the one I already live in, and maybe that's why it's hard for me. I'm not really sure, but I really did like that one. It kind of is like a Regency romance, sort of. You could look at it that way. It's not in any time, like it's a made up world. So it's not like in our time period or like in the 1800s or anything like that. It's a totally different world, but it is a love story and an adventure story. And you know, they're on the sort of on the high seas type of a thing with pirates. So it was a really fun story, and my daughter also really loved it as well. And then I have Yumi and the Midnight Painter on my Kindle because my husband had it already, and so he's like, these two were written around the same time period, and I think he wrote them for his wife. Brandon Sanderson wrote them for his wife. I can't remember for sure, but something like that. And so he's like, you might actually like this one too, or you might like it more. And I have started it. I have had a hard time getting into it again. I think it's just creating a world that's so different than my own. It's kind of hard for me. And so I think if I'll just give it a chance, then it'll be fine and I'll really enjoy it. I just have had other things I wanted to read more. So anyways, I really love those. So if you haven't read any of Brandon Sanderson's books, I'd recommend trying some out because they're really great. My oldest son that's 12 also likes a lot of his books as well. And my husband is not one that reads a whole lot for just fun, like more frivolous reading. He reads a ton, just not that kind of stuff. And so when this is who he reads when he gets a moment or when he doesn't get a moment, just because he likes them so much. So that was the first thing that I read to start off this year. This next thing I read was Same Time Next Summer, and I think this was recommended by Brooke Romney on Instagram, which is why I thought I'd try it out. And I liked it. I wouldn't say it was amazing. I wouldn't say it was like a flop either, but it's kind of your just typical, I guess, run-of-the-mill romance story, and that's probably why I didn't like it very much. I'm very much like, I read a lot of romance stories, but I love more historical or Regency, like I like historical fiction or Regency romance times more. I don't read a whole lot of current, like in our current time period stories very often. And when I do, they're not necessarily my favorites. I don't know what it is about that. I don't know, maybe I just like reading about other people's time periods and not my own. But this was still a cute story. There is some sexual content, which is, so some of the other books I'm going to mention also have some sexual content. This one, I feel like it was just more of the purpose of the book was that, which I don't love when the purpose of the book is that, to get into bed with somebody. That's not my favorite thing. And so I like it when the characters are developed and when the relationship like is meaningful and things like that. So this was one, I think it's on the Long Island Sound, I believe. I can't remember where they were going, but they go to like a beach house there. And so it's about like a past love she had as a teenager, and then comes back and she's engaged to someone else, and then kind of refinding that love. So it goes through that whole story there. So again, if you just like simple love stories and just something to, you know, that you can mindlessly read, I feel like this is a good option. All right, so the next book I read was To the Bright Edge of the World, and I really enjoyed this one actually. I mentioned it, if you follow me on Instagram, I talked about it briefly there when I finished it and how much I enjoyed it. And so you can, I will post occasional stuff like that on my Instagram, so you can look down in the description for it. It's just at Jackie Paulson. And this one is about Alaska, and it's placed, I think, in the late 1800s, 1885 is what it says. And it is based on true stories, but the story itself isn't exactly true. You know, it's a historical fiction book. And it's like the edge of the frontier. You know, Alaska is unexplored, basically. There's a few places that people have explored a little bit, but for the most part, it hadn't really been explored that much. And Washington State was still just Washington Territory is what they're calling it in this book. And just a lot of it, it was not a developed world yet. And so it's about a girl and her husband. And her husband is an explorer. I think he used to be in the military. Like, he might still be in the military, a colonel maybe. And so he is going to explore parts of Alaska. And she was going to go with him for part of it, but she finds out she's pregnant and stuff right before it's time to go. And so he just goes without her and goes with a couple other men. And it talks about their journey through there, because they're kind of going, I don't know if it's even up the middle because it's like an older map, so it's kind of hard for me to tell. I'd have to look on a normal picture of Alaska and find all the landmarks, but they go up and then come out like on the western coast, and that's where they're picked up by a boat to be taken back down to Vancouver area or, you know, Washington State area and stuff. So it talks about their adventures, and it's written like a journal, which I think is super fun. And so it has like her name right here, and she's in the Vancouver barracks, and then it will have him in here as well, and just writing in his journal. So, oh, he's a lieutenant colonel is right here. So, and he'll write his little thing so that one day, you know, hopefully they can read each other's journal entries, because there's not ways to send letters. There is ways to send letters, but you're lucky if they get them, right? And he's gone for months. And so it's like, if they actually reach him in any sort of way, like that would be amazing. And I think he does get one or two while he is journeying through Alaska. But the other way to keep track of everything, right, is to keep a journal. And so that's what they do. And there are obviously some sensitive things in here. It's talking about there's a lot of death that's happening. It's talking about the Native Americans in this area and the struggles they're going through. It also talks about her with her pregnancy and some struggles she's going through. And so there are some sensitive issues there, just in case those things are kind of triggering for you. But I really, really enjoyed it. Another book on Alaska that I really liked was The Great Alone. And I think, again, that one's based on some facts, but a bigger chunk of that story, I believe, is fiction. And that's by Kristen Hanna. That's her name. I think I said it backwards. Kristen Hanna. And I really like that one as well. That one, again, has a lot of sensitive, like, triggering things in it. So just FYI. But I really enjoyed this, and it also has a separate dialogue from people more in present day collecting these journals and trying to set up a museum of sorts or someplace where people can look at these records. And so there's a little bit of that dialogue. So it's like a book of letters and journal entries, and it's different the way it's written, but it's a lot of fun and it keeps you like engaged. It's not boring, I don't feel like. I wanted to know what was gonna happen next, and it was just interesting and crazy to just think about doing what they're doing. I'm like, how in the heck does somebody do that? Like, go out in the middle of nothing, you know, you have no phones, you have no internet, you have no way to communicate with anyone basically, you know, and you're going out into everything that you don't know, you don't understand, and exploring it. Obviously we need people like that, but it's just absolutely crazy to me that people do that. Okay, the last two books I wanted to mention are by the same author. And so this one is the one I read first, A Girl Called Samson. And this is for book club as well. This one and To the Bright Edge of the World, I'm like, what is the title? Are both book club books. And I think this one's in a few months. I don't know, they sent out a list, so I just started reading. And I was really excited to read this one from the description. It's during the Revolutionary War. And there's this girl that her mom can't take care of her. You know, she has 5 kids or something, the mom does. And so kind of pushes them all out to places that they can be indentured servants, basically, for a certain amount of time. And so that's what she was to this family that had 10 boys. She's there as kind of like this bound. She says she's bound to them basically till she's 18 years old. And she goes there when she's 10. And so she continues to work with them, you know, grows up with these boys. They are her family. And then the Revolutionary War is happening. And all these boys, I think all of them eventually serve in the war. And there's a lot of them that die in the war. But one of the things she wants to do, growing up with all these boys, she became like the best one shooting a rifle. Like she learned how to wrestle, like all these things, you know, how to fight. She wanted to be a soldier. And so then she does, like she dresses up like a boy and joins the army. But during this whole time when she was younger, she is writing a friend. And so this friend, she doesn't know her, she's never met her, and she's 10 years older than, they say Samson, her name is Deborah. And so Deborah is 10 years younger than this friend that she is writing to. And they are like great pen pals and everything. And so eventually, like she runs into this friend's husband, and there's just a whole story that evolves. Obviously, I'm not going to tell you it all because then it would spoil the whole thing. But it goes through this whole story there. And again, there is some sexual content in this book. It's more towards the end. And I hate describing these things. I don't know if people care or if they don't care, and everyone has differing opinions. I feel like it's fairly mild. I don't read anything super graphic. So again, I have nothing like intense to compare it to, but it's fairly mild, I would say, compared to what it could be for sure. And the language is really clean in these books. Actually, I was very, very surprised at that, because this one, doesn't really have that much language, and then until it does. And it's like all F words. So anyways, if you care about those things or want to know about those things, that's what's happening. I'm trying to think if there was anything else I wanted to mention. It's just a really great book. I really liked it. Again, historical fiction, and I just enjoy historical fiction a lot. I love reading about what's going on, but also having a story to go with it, because I feel like it just makes it so much more interesting. So along with this, I looked up this author because I loved this book. Like I loved it so much. I was just like so excited about it. And so I looked up the author on Amazon, and she has a bunch of books actually, and they're on Kindle Unlimited. And so I was like, oh, this is perfect. I've only read one of them, and let me look at what it's even called, since I don't have the actual book, From Sand and Ash. So I just went through and looked at some of the descriptions and picked one that sounded the most interesting at that time. And I think they're all historical fiction, just from my quick like perusal of all the titles. I think they're all historical fiction in some way, right? Some of them are placed further back, some are more recent. And this one, I just read it on my Kindle, and I just finished it like literally like an hour ago. I loved it so much. Like, it was a really good one as well. I liked this one more, actually. So this one was by far my favorite. I can't say by far my favorite because I haven't even read anymore, but already I love it when I find a new author that I like really enjoy and that is like mostly clean reading. So the one that I just finished was placed during World War II in Italy and talking about some Jews in Italy during that time, and then also like a Catholic priest and his role in all this. And again, there's a love story that goes through it. And if you've been around here, I like World War II. Like, it's one of my favorite time periods to read about. And so I really enjoyed this book as well. Like I said, I like the other one better. I think it's just the idea of like a woman dressing up as a man and getting away with it. I don't know why that's just fascinating, but it is. And it actually happened. Like, that woman actually existed in history because she talks about it a little bit at the end of this book. And so that's really interesting to me. But I also enjoyed the World War II one. And I'm sure next time I do a book review, I'll have even more books from her that I get to share about because I'm excited to go pick the next one right now. All right, so those are the books I have been reading recently. I have several more. Like, again, I just got excited again about reading, and I am so excited to read several more books. Some of them, again, are more like historical fiction. Some of them are a little bit more educational, intellectual type things, pushing my brain to think that, you know, when it doesn't want to think and stuff. So I'm excited to go through all those. And if you have any book recommendations, please list them down below because so many of the books I read come from you guys, come from book club recommendations. That's where I get a lot of the really good books that I read. And remember to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you next time.